Hi, and welcome to my podcast, Cracken's Corner, hosted by me, Lauren McCracken. For this podcast, at least, my hope is that I can bring something that's encouraging and will kind of bring out personal growth in people, including myself. I'd really like to continue to try to develop into the person I'd like to become. And I think that's kind of a lifelong thing. And I'd like to talk about mental health because I think that's a very important topic, especially now. I'd really like to create a space where everyone feels welcome and they can get something out of this, because I'm hoping I can get something out of this too. So for this first episode, I really wanted to focus on the idea of anxiety versus courage, because I know a lot about anxiety, and courage is something that's always kind of intrigued me in my life because it's such a difficult choice to make at times, but it can be so massively rewarding. When I started to think about moments of courage, the first big moment that I could really remember was really seeing, when I was in 6th grade, we experienced 9/11 here in the United States of America, and nothing else in my living history has ever compared to that experience. Viewing it as a child is very different from viewing it now, in retrospect, as an adult. But at that time, watching all those horrible things happen was shocking. It was absolutely stunning to see on TV. It didn't seem real. I remember seeing it on the news, and they had it playing in our school, and people were crying and freaking out, and nobody really knew how to handle it, because in our experience of growing up in America at that point, as children, we'd always felt very safe, at least from any sort of outside threat. And this shattered that for us. This kind of woke us up, I think, to a reality that a lot of other people our age had been living in for probably a very long time because they had different circumstances. But anyway, seeing that stuff happen and seeing how first responders came in, how many firefighters, how many doctors, nurses, rescue personnel, volunteer, stepped up and actually really threw themselves into this situation that most of them had never ever experienced anything close to in their lives, was so courageous and so inspiring. I think I was in awe. Maybe 2 weeks or so after the immediate attacks, everyone was nicer to each other. And it was kind of stunning. I noticed that as a kid. I could imagine noticing it as an adult. How strangers on the street were suddenly talking to each other, and they were a little bit more considerate. Everyone was kind of better, which was weird because I think we all experienced such a big collective trauma that we sort of bonded for a while as a nation. It didn't feel like we were divided by anything. We were all just Americans. And in that sense, it was nice. I really missed that feeling of unity. But that courage that I saw was just incredible. And it still blows my mind today. And, that's a really big, pretty dramatic, I guess, example of courage. But I feel like it's something we can all take something out of. And it can inspire us to be courageous in a lot of other ways. When I think of courage in everyday life, obviously there are still firefighters and doctors and nurses and people who volunteer, and that's amazing. Some of us don't have such epic jobs, but maybe we can be courageous in other ways. An interesting thing for me to try to keep in mind, at least that I've tried to remember over the course of my life as someone who has always suffered with anxiety problems, pretty much since the beginning, was that idea that you can't be courageous if you're not afraid of something. The only time you're capable of showing courage is when you know you're afraid and you decide to do something different. Whether that's going out and trying a whole new way of life, moving somewhere, taking a new job, putting yourself out there, whether that's to make new friends or to, find a romantic partner or just to find something new, that's courageous. When you fight against the status quo and you stand up for a cause that you believe in. Right now we're living in a time when there's a lot of people who are choosing to be extremely courageous and stand up for the freedoms and the protections of so many marginalized people. And I think that's awesome. That's amazing. And that's the kind of thing that we should all be inspired by. Yeah, so I guess I should talk a little bit about myself just to give a brief idea of where I'm coming from here. I'm 30. I know. I hope I look decent for that age. I guess I do. I don't know. You can't really tell. I've had OCD since I was like 16. I think that's when I was diagnosed. I've had depression since I was a child. I kind of always knew that I was depressed. I just thought it was normal and that everyone felt like that for the most part. Because if you don't have anything else to compare it to, you just assume that's everyone else's experience. I was a very, very shy kid. I was really uncomfortable with having a lot of attention on myself, mostly because I was made aware quite early on that I was different. I was weird. I didn't fit in with other people. Not by choice, mostly just by my lack of social skills, I guess, at that time. I've always kind of been a little awkward. I wasn't aware of the nuances that most people were picking up, I guess. And I kind of danced to the beat of my own drum a bit too much, I guess. But I'm glad in retrospect that I did, because it showed me a lot about the way that people treat you when you are not perceived to be, important. When you're not perceived to be, like, fashionable or interesting or beautiful. Like, I felt very, very ugly and weird growing up. So the way that people treated me then kind of guided me a lot in my life towards how I would treat others as I grew up. I tried to learn from that, and be kinder to people, because in reality, you never really know where someone is in their life. You don't know what they're dealing with when they go home. You don't know what kind of circumstances they're handling, especially as kids. So many people can just be kind of blind to the struggles of others. So I've tried really hard to be a little more patient with people who maybe are difficult to get along with or kind of nasty. Like, at least now as an adult, I try to think, maybe they're going through a really hard time right now, and that's why they're being kind of a dick right now, and let it slide more. And I feel like that's just a better way to go through life. Assume the best of people. Give them the benefit of the doubt, because you don't know. Yeah. So I really wasn't a confident kid growing up. So when I think about one time when I really pulled out a bit of courage in my life, it would probably be my grade school reunion, which sounds really weird if you're not familiar with the terminology. I grew up Catholic, so my parents sent me to a private Catholic school. So that was called a grade school. It was 1st through 8th grade. So basically, 7 to 14-ish age range. You really got to know people when you spend 8 years in a school with them, and it's not a very big school. So, yeah, from that experience, you graduate, you're 14. Everyone's kind of awkward when they're 14, unless you kind of have your shit together very early, which some people did, which is incredible. That wasn't me, though. I mostly just didn't want to be around anyone at that point. I was so self-conscious and so aware of how like different I was, and how I just felt out of place completely. So when, years and years had gone by since that point in my life, and I'd received an invitation on like Facebook about this reunion thing happening, and I felt my heart drop in my throat and down my stomach. And all of that self-confidence that I had developed and built over the last, I don't know, 7 or 8 years by that point, just disappeared. Like, it was just gone. And I was back in the shoes of my 14-year-old self, who just wanted to disappear and not exist anymore, anywhere, because I was so afraid of how other people would judge me and treat me. So when I found out about it, there was this huge panic, as I've kind of spoken about. And I was like, how do I deal with this? Because I'm an adult now, and I don't want to always feel like my past is going to hold me back. Like, we all have things that are difficult in our life. Like, are we going to choose to overcome them, or at least to fight them? Or am I going to let this keep me down? And I was like, despite how absolutely terrified I am right now, I think I want to fight this. So I reconnected with a really old friend of mine, one of my best friends, actually, my friend Pat. And he'd spoken with me about it. And I said, I just don't know, Pat. Like, how the hell am I going to do this? Because I feel like I'm letting myself stay in this state of fear if I don't go. Like, nothing good would come of it if I don't go. But if I do go, it's a risk. Either I go again and maybe people are still really nasty towards me. Not everyone, obviously, but like certain people are really nasty to you when you're younger like that. And you remember being bullied. Like, that stuff doesn't just disappear from your memory. Anything that emotionally charged kind of sticks with you, almost more so than the good memories you have, which is unfortunate, but it's just the truth. But he kind of, talked me into it, and he was like, yeah, like, you're strong enough to do this. You have to do this for your younger self, to be like, you know what? I'm not going to be afraid anymore. I'm not going to let that stop me from living a full life. So I was like, all right, and I agreed. I agreed with what he thought, and I was determined. I was like, you know what? If I'm going to do this, I'm going to go 100% into this. So, I thought back on all the things I was made fun of for as a kid. I was very awkward, obviously, socially, but also just like physically, I looked very different. I was kind of a chubby kid, and I didn't have the best hygiene, and I was very shy, and I thought, what can I do about that? Now, obviously, I had grown into an adult body, which didn't look anything like what I looked like then. So I was like, well, I want to look nice, So I tried to dress up. I did my hair. I did my makeup. I worked really hard to try to, at least on the outside, look like a normal person, or like what I thought was, a normal person, and someone that wouldn't be picked on, because that really destroyed my self-esteem as a kid. And, I was ready to go to war. That's the best way I can describe it. It's like, I'm not going to let that keep me down anymore. So at the time, I was with an ex-boyfriend of mine who was extremely supportive of me in this, because he understood how I felt. And he was like, you're not walking in there alone. I'm going to be there with you. And if we want to leave, we can leave. I'm not going to let anyone disrespect you or speak to you in any kind of way that's rude. And I really appreciated that. And, I still carried a lot of that fear. And I remember pulling up to this reunion, and my legs were shaking violently. But I was so determined to fight this. I was like, you know what? I don't even care at this point. I have to do this for myself. You kind of find some sort of mettle in yourself when your back is against the wall, and you're like, I don't care how stupid I look right now, how afraid I am, or how I'm going to be judged. I'm just going to do the best that I can and try to be nice to everybody and try to give people a chance, because I do believe that people can change. So, even though I was terrified out of my mind, I walked through those doors, damn it. And I was kind of shocked, to be honest with you. I was hoping for the best and expecting the worst. And most people were actually really nice to me. And that kind of shocked me. Like, when you come from that kind of mindset of someone who has always been treated like shit by certain people in your life, and suddenly they're not treating you that way, and people who had never noticed you before, people who had never acknowledged the fact that you breathe on the same planet as them, were like talking to me, that was bizarre. That was so bizarre. Like, surreal. Like, I felt like I was living someone else's life. Like, this wasn't actually happening to me. And what kind of stunned me more was the fact that I was getting all this attention, and it was positive attention. Like, people were so nice. And I'd like to think that, most people do grow up to be better than whatever it was they were in the past, They were probably dealing with a lot of hard things themselves, and that could have made them less than the best that they could be. It could have made them kind of mean. It could have made them kind of insecure about themselves and projecting things on other people and, lashing out. So I try to be forgiving of that. And I was just kind of floored, because I was always used to being the person who was afraid. And when I went there, I realized there were some people who were actually afraid to talk to me. And that was just such a backwards reality for me. I kind of didn't know how to handle that. But I felt honored and really, I don't know, just floored. It was interesting how many people were so openly warm to me and so friendly, and a lot of people didn't recognize me because I had changed so much in that time period. And I obviously looked very different, and I acted very different because I felt more confident despite how afraid I was. And I warmed up and kind of came into my own. And for the most part, it was great. Though it was really kind of hilarious when I remember there was 2 girls who were particularly nasty to me when I was growing up. And, I hope the best for everybody. And they were just glaring at me. And I just thought it was kind of weird because I had been nothing but nice to them. And I was I kind of realized something. And I was like, oh my God, they're jealous of the fact that I have all this attention on me? Because for some reason, I still don't fully understand. I guess I was the center of attention, which I've never been in my whole life. And I was like, this is kind of hilarious, because I'm not that great. I'm not perfect. I'm not that interesting. But these super successful people are really mad at me because I have this attention right now. And I kind of just didn't know what to do. So I sort of ended up just smiling. And I just smiled at them the whole time. I was just nice. Because you know what? There's no point in being nasty to somebody when they're mean. There's no point. You get nothing out of it. You just kind of let go of that. And you realize maybe that was coming from some point of, insecurity in them. But I definitely felt really good to realize that I wasn't going to let them or anyone else hold me down and keep me in that state of fear anymore. So yeah, that was sort of crazy. That was one of those experiences where you go home and you still don't believe it actually happened, even though you just lived it. And I love telling that story because I know so many people out there who have been bullied or who have been picked on specifically, because they were different somehow. Whether it's because, they look different, maybe their body type was unusual, their behavior was unusual, it could have been maybe you have a different, background than everyone else. A lot of people that I knew growing up ended up coming out as gay, and they were closeted. And maybe they were picked on for that, which is also horrible. And I like to tell that story to younger people because it's things actually can get better. And a lot of times when you grow up, most people will be a lot kinder than they were as kids. And they realize And if they realize how nasty they were, they feel really bad about it and they want to be better. So yeah, I kind of wanted to give people a little bit of hope with that, and I hope it gives you a bit of hope today. So yeah, I guess the takeaway here is that most people grow up to be pretty decent human beings, and when you choose to be courageous for yourself, you can grow so much from that, and you get so much from that. Like, that built me up like nothing ever could, because it destroyed that bit of fear inside of me that was holding me back, I guess, in my own adult life. Even if it wasn't a conscious thing anymore, you know, there was always that insecurity. And it was kind of just gone at that point. I'm like, wow, I'm okay now. I don't stand out, at least not to the degree where I have to feel afraid anymore. And it also really showed me that you don't really know how people are going to turn out. Someone may be really, really quiet when they're younger and then become really outgoing when they're older. Or maybe they were really outgoing and confident, and maybe now they're a bit more reserved. And, like, that's okay. So I guess this week I'd really like to call you to be courageous in your own life, in whatever capacity you feel able to. Maybe it's reaching out because you're dealing with depression or anxiety or something similar to that, and you need help. It can be extremely scary to admit when you're having a problem, especially within our current world. I think there's still a lot of stigma around, like, men, for example, asking for help when they feel vulnerable. I think within different cultures, there's still a big, like, kind of taboo about that, and it's very unfortunate because everyone deserves help whenever you're having a hard time. And in general, I think therapy would be great for everyone, if for no other reason than to kind of realize where you're struggling in your life or where you have a fault that you could try to work on, you know, hopefully making better. Maybe I'd like to encourage you also to just, like, reach out to someone who you think might be going through a hard time and try to be a listening ear. Try to offer to take them out and help them forget about their problems for a little while and just care a bit more. Yeah, and I'd really hope that you can do something this week that you're a little bit afraid to do, because it's those moments that can completely change your perspective on yourself and the world. So, yeah, I guess that's it. This is the end of my very first podcast. And yeah, I guess I was kind of scared to do it just because I'm a little bit self-conscious about being on camera and being recorded. And obviously, I still care what other people think of me to some extent. But, you know, I hope that you can get something out of this. And I really hope that I can hear from you as well. If you're interested, I have an email set up now, Cracken's Corner Podcast @gmail.com, if you'd like to send any stories in, anything you'd like to share, if you have any questions, or maybe you want to give some advice, you know, or maybe you'd like some advice. I'd like to help, and hopefully you got something good out of this, and I hope I can kind of continue on my way with this, make at least a few episodes, and I hope you have a great day. Bye.